I'm on a mark. This is awesome.
Present day.
I'm on a mark with a beer. This is even better.
Present time.
They're the eternal questions. Is there a God? What is reality? What is our place in the world? Well, every now and again, something comes along and tries to answer those questions, or at the very least, pose them in a much more interesting way. And with that in mind, today we're going to talk about a series called Serial Experiments Lain. The series itself is about a young lady by the name of Lain Iwakura. Lain probably is one of the most isolated characters that I've ever seen in any particular type of media. Now, this series was written kind of at the advent of the internet age. It was written in 1998. The series itself was shown in 1999. So we were kind of in the period of the first peak of the internet boom, but social culture on the internet had not evolved to where it is today. Lain as a character does not interact with her fellow students very much. She really just doesn't do anything with her computer, and she doesn't interact very much with the world around her. She kind of goes to school, takes notes, comes back, and kind of fades back into the world again. Until one of her classmates ends up committing suicide by jumping off of a building. That in and of itself is not so much the shocking part as much as it is 2 days later when her classmates start receiving emails from that student saying that she's passed beyond and found God. And this is where the plot of Serial Experiments Lain begins. Lain becomes kind of adopted by 3 students within her class, who we will refer to, I would give them names, but it isn't really important. You've got the happy one, the pretty one, and the bitchy one. And that's pretty much about all you need to know about those 3 students. They begin to take her places, try to help her get out a little bit into the world, and as she starts wandering amongst people, she begins to notice that people are reacting to her in different ways. Some people don't know her, some people know her from school, some people know her from the internet, which she hasn't really been on, and some people say that she's been like putting together raves and hanging out at clubs and such. And all of this begins to become fairly confusing for her, but as we go along, the plot begins to explain all of it. Now here's where I have to say that the plot of Serial Experiments Lain is really, really interesting, but once you get past the point that I've just explained, it kind of becomes one long spoiler. It's difficult to explain the plot in and of itself without really giving away the direction that it's headed in. And quite frankly, that's kind of the fun of the series. It's one long series of mysteries about this young lady, but in the end, they're all resolved, as opposed to, say, Neon Genesis, which gave us a whole bunch of questions and then ended the world rather than answer them. But we'll talk about that series later. The main character of this series, as I said, is Lain. Most of the people around her are kind of cardboard cutouts, but as you go along, it's not so much a matter of the fact that it's poor writing, it's more a matter of the fact that those characters need to be cardboard cutouts for the rest of the plot to work. That may not make sense in the way that I'm saying it, but when you watch it, you begin to realize that might be one of the very few real people, and everything else around her is being very carefully orchestrated. The sound in Serial Experiments Lain is really interesting. Musically, there's basically 2 main parts. There's the opening theme.
And you don't seem to understand. A shame you seemed an honest man.
Which, in a way, when you hear it, tells you that you're going to be entering a series unlike anything you've seen in anime before. And then there's the closing theme, which is also kind of interesting, but not nearly as impressive. Then the rest of the music in the film is either kind of odd techno background music when they're in clubs or something like that, or the strange hum and buzzing of the sound of electricity or telephone wires, or the sound of the city around her. The sound in this is really minimalist, but it actually adds to the overall texture and technique of the story. The visual style of Serial Experiments Lain is really where I kind of came to fall in love with it as a series. There's always something kind of interesting and odd and a little bit strange about the background of where she's at. You'll see shadows, but inside of the shadows there appears to be blood spatter patterns. There's lights happening in places where light really shouldn't be. The reflections of things tend to appear in windows but then disappear. There's always something in the background that, even when it seems to be a relatively innocuous scene, that makes it feel strange, a little bit off, and kind of helps to increase the overall level of tension and paranoia in the film. The art direction in this is quite frankly amazing. The animation in Serial Experiments Lain, considering that it was done around 1999 for a TV series, is really well done. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of filler animation. There's not a whole lot of repeating patterns. There's not that classic old anime trick of somebody's lines being spoken with somebody with a book in front of their face so they can save money by not animating their lips. Everything is really well done, and it's kind of top-notch for the time period. It might look a little bit dated today, but not by much. It really does hold up very, very well. On the subject of sub or dub, this is where a lot of anime fans really kind of like split right down the middle. There are some people who are hardcore subtitling fans that want to have the authenticity of the Japanese, and then there are hardcore fans of dubbing who want to be able to hear the actual lines being spoken and not have to feel like they have to take their eyes off of the screen to be able to appreciate what's going on. Now, for me, I have to say that the dub on this is absolutely amazing. The voice acting in this is really, really good. The lady that plays Lain in this does a very good job of doing both a very, very shy and demure Japanese girl and a very involved and kind of active main character, kind of highlighting the differences in her personality as the series progresses. So a quick word of warning about Serial Experiments Lain. Something that I think the casual viewer needs to know. If you're entering into this expecting to see a lot of the typical anime tropes, giant robots, big explosions, guns, a lot of fan service, this isn't the anime for you. This is an anime based more around the entire notion of having to think your way through it. You really do have to pay attention to this series. There's a lot of stuff that you see in the background at the very outset that doesn't seem very important, but then becomes crucially important toward the tail end. So I'd recommend it for somebody who wants to see something completely different and unusual from the standard anime style. And for that, I highly recommend it. But if you're a casual viewer who just wants to see some stuff blow up, well, then I recommend Full Metal Panic, because that'll totally work for you. So in the end, my final recommendation for Serial Experiments Lain: if you're somebody like me that wants to find something new, interesting, and unusual, something outside of the standard, and I laugh saying new, it was done in 1999, but it's just now gotten a re-release on Blu-ray and DVD, and for that, I really recommend that you pick it up. I recommend it. If you're a casual anime viewer, it's probably not going to be your thing. So keep that in mind when you take a look at the series. It's unusual, and it's interesting, and it's not at all what you're going to expect a typical anime to be. And with that, I'm Dave Nesbit. This is A Mind Apart. Thank you very much. I had a brain, and then I think this took it. And it just kind of happens sometimes. One beer and the next thing.
That's what it's supposed to do.
Poor thing for an Irish kid from Wisconsin to say. But,